I posted a video a while back titled, "Why are bodybuilders so muscular?" And the goal was to explain exactly why, out of all the different people in the gym training for their specific goal, why do bodybuilders actually grow more muscle? The video reached almost 2 million views at the time of making this video, and I would say, based on the comments, that less than half the people watching the video actually understood the message. So in this video, I'm gonna elaborate on my thoughts, and I'm gonna explain exactly what it is that bodybuilders are doing that actually builds more muscle. Spoiler, the reason is not PEDs. I'll tell you why in a minute. But getting back to the original argument, you have bodybuilders, powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters, people training for sports, and just the average gym bros. Yet when we look at all of them, all weight training, all training very hard, all progressing towards their goals, it's obviously the bodybuilders out of all of them that's putting on more muscle tissue. Now, of course, that's their only goal, and not everybody's training specifically to build more muscle. But even powerlifters, strength athletes, and Olympic weightlifters, they're all training very hard. Yet they're not growing the same amount of muscle tissue. And in many cases, we can look at every other variable outside of training. Things like diet, rest, lifestyle, and of course, we can explore PEDs. If we look at all those things, many of them are actually equal, especially at the top level. The one thing that's clearly different is the training. So the question is, what is it about the training specifically that causes bodybuilders to build more muscle? And there are many reasons for this. But first, let's get to the arguments. The number one most common argument that I got on the video was, of course, anabolics. People ranting that bodybuilders are just simply bigger because they take PEDs. But the truth is, putting aside drug-tested organizations, top untested powerlifters, they take anabolics. Strongman competitors, of course, they as well use anabolics. Olympic weightlifters, they use them as well. Teams are busted all the time, even in the Olympics, for PEDs. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and be one of those people that makes blanket statements like all athletes use PEDs. There are plenty of clean organizations that are absolutely drug-free. And I know many of lifetime drug-free natural athletes that are legitimately lifetime drug-free, with even more impressive physiques than untested bodybuilders. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you're gonna use the arguments that PEDs are the reason that bodybuilders are more muscular than powerlifters, strongmen, and Olympic weightlifters, and the fact is, at the top level, there are guys using them and there are guys who aren't. But if you took a group of men, all the same age, all the same weight, gave them the same diet, the same supplements, but had one group train like bodybuilders, one group train like powerlifters, and the other group train like Olympic weightlifters, the bodybuilders will eventually carry way more muscle mass than the other two groups. So obviously, anabolics is a poor argument here, nutrition is a poor argument here, and lifestyle is a poor argument as well. And ultimately, it's the training that's drastically different. And the differences in training come down to three things. The first difference is what they're actually doing with the weights. Powerlifters, strongmen, and Olympic athletes, they're all lifting weights. Their goal is to use as many muscles as possible to lift the heaviest weight possible. Bodybuilders, they're doing the exact opposite. They're using weights to train their muscles. A powerlifter's goal is to get the weight from point A to point B in the most efficient manner possible. That could even mean using shorter ranges of motion and engaging multiple muscle groups on each lift. A great example of this would be the bench press. In bodybuilding, this is strictly thought of as a movement to train the pecs. In powerlifting, you have a focus on using the back, the lats, and even use leg drive. This makes it not necessarily a chest movement, but actually a full body movement. Again, a bodybuilder, he's doing the exact opposite. He's taking the exercise and putting his body in a position to work the pecs the most efficient way possible. Effectively, he's making his lifting technique as a whole inefficient. In other words, the bodybuilder is lifting in a specific way to use less muscle groups. This makes it harder for him to simply lift the weight, since now the target muscle is forced to do the majority of the lift without the assistance muscles. These are all things you can literally see just watching a powerlifter and a bodybuilder perform the same movement. Watch a bodybuilder incline press or flat press. If they're training properly for their goal, you'll likely see a full stretch and a full contraction of the target muscle, in this case, the chest. A powerlifter or strongman, you're likely to see them use a technique that allows them to lift significantly heavier weights. However, you'll see not a focus on just one muscle group. The second reason ties right into the first, and if you're a beginner, it might look like the exact same reason, but it's actually very different when you become more advanced and you understand this concept a bit more. And that is lifting a weight versus placing more tension on a muscle. Progressive overload is the key to getting stronger and building more muscle. As powerlifters train, they aim to get stronger so that they can lift more weights. That means they use as many muscle groups as possible within the context of powerlifting form to lift more weight on the bench press. If they've done so, they've effectively gotten stronger on that lift. But that might not even mean that their chest, Their shoulders or even their triceps have gotten significantly stronger. Maybe they've just perfected their technique, or they've gotten more efficient or skilled at the lift. Now, bodybuilders in the gym are progressively overloading so that they can build more muscle. If a bodybuilder is currently doing dumbbell presses with 100 pounds and he's aiming to get to 110 pounds, as he becomes stronger and he can lift those heavier dumbbells, he's now placing more tension on the target muscles with 110 pounds than he could with 100. This extra tension on the muscle is what's actually growing new muscle tissue rather than just lifting a heavier load. And this is one of the main reasons you might see a powerlifter or a strongman add 20 or 30 pounds to a lift, yet their physique doesn't really change drastically. Whereas if a bodybuilder lifts 20 or 30 more pounds and his technique on the lift is standardized, you can definitely expect to see muscle growth to the area. The next reason is isolation training. Powerlifters train lifts and movement patterns. Bodybuilders are training muscle groups. The goal for a powerlifter who has 315 on the bench is to press it horizontally. The goal for a bodybuilder who has 315 on the bench is to work his middle and outer pecs. And to take that a step further, the bodybuilder will use isolation exercises like flies to further work those pecs without the assistance of the shoulders and the triceps. Now, all these points are just scratching the surface, and there are many more differences between bodybuilders and powerlifters and anyone who weight trains. And this is not to say that bodybuilding training is better than any other style of lifting. If I was training specifically for powerlifting, I would only incorporate a small amount of bodybuilding into my training. And if I was focusing on other sports, it would be even less. But if your goal is to build muscle, there's a reason that bodybuilding training works so well. And if you understand those reasonings more, you're likely going to get even more out of your training. I'm very big on promoting basic compound lifts for progressive overload over time, but it's very common for guys to fall into the trap of thinking that just means powerlifting, right? If I train my bench like a powerlifter, I'll grow bigger pecs, right? If I focus on lifting with that powerlifter in the gym and keeping up with him, I'll grow bigger legs and a bigger back, right? And if you watch this video, you'll understand that while progression is always key, it can be a lot more nuanced if your goal is specifically to build more muscle. And if that's you, you need to make sure that you're progressing on all your lifts. But remember, you want to keep your form standardized at all times. If you go from a 225 bench to a 315 bench, but your form is not standardized, you didn't necessarily progress on that lift, and your target muscles probably won't grow as a result. You likely just got more efficient at lifting that weight, or you're ego lifting. You want to make sure that your goal is not specifically training more heavy just for the sake of more weight on the bar, but you want to train heavier for more tension on the muscles. You also want to make sure that you're just not lifting a weight from point A to point B, but rather using a heavy enough weight to make the target muscle stretch and contract under a load. You're doing all this to create a stimulus for muscle growth. And if you find that you're not doing any of these things currently, I highly recommend that you incorporate all of them into your training if your goal is specifically to build more muscle. And if you want the exact training programs that I personally recommend to build more muscle using proven old school bodybuilding methods, all my old school mass gain programs are down below. And as always, if you want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.